Welcome everybody to another episode of Follow Me and Die. Today I wanted to respond to a question I had on my last video when I was talking about how to be a great game master. I mentioned using puzzles and riddles to occupy the players to give the GM a break. And they wanted to know more about using puzzles, and I'm going to include riddles as puzzles because those two go hand in hand. And I'm reminded of an example in the weekly game I play in where at different times we've come across some keys that got us into places that weren't obvious to other people, or other people kept walking by the place not knowing that there was a key. And the puzzle is, how does the key work? The quote experts say that are the quest givers let you know this is a key that'll help you get into this place nobody else has noticed in this particular dungeon, and you think, oh, it'll be obvious, and then it turns out to be not to be quite so obvious, and it takes time, effort, and planning to figure out how the heck does this key do what it's supposed to do, and are we even in the right place? And you just have to keep trying and trying until you figure it out. And the example is we first were in an old ruin that was now the sewers of the city where we were, and we had this key that had a round key that was large and fit around, was worn on a thong around your neck and had an opening in it, and you had to find the spot where there was some sort of a protrusion on a pedestal and put the key on there. So half the battle was surviving the dungeon to find where this was. Then it was a puzzle, just how do we get there without killing ourselves, because it involved a controlling a rotating walkway that you couldn't get to from one direction, having to find the right door and get through that door to then figure out the right way to operate the thing so that everybody could easily get to where you were trying to go without risking falling far enough that you were going to die. And so all those different pieces led up to the puzzle. 1, locate the place you're looking for. 2, figure out how to get there so that once you get there, you can actually try to figure out how to use the key. And so the puzzle just was like onions. You peel away a layer and, oh, wait a minute, we got to figure this part out, until you finally get to the final piece, and then you're like, oh, okay, this is how it works. And then it makes sense. And it requires a group of players agreeing on how to proceed, because everybody's going to have their own idea on what the description from the game master means about the location, the device, and the description of what you think is the correct place to use it. And so anytime you find a pedestal sticking up in the middle of the floor, you're looking for a way to hook this key on there to try it. So the puzzle is a multi-use tool in that it's going to occupy the players as their goal, find the spot where you use that key, and then it ends up being, of course, the last place they look, and then it all makes sense and it fits, and they feel satisfied because they were thorough and tried all the other options, and then they finally figured it out. A similar use of a key was a similar key, but to activate it, the bearer of the key actually had to sit in a chair or a throne, as it were, and we were doing everything but sitting in the throne and getting frustrated. We're shining a light through the hole because there's no pedestal, and we're doing all this other stuff, trying to figure it out. Finally, the only thing we hadn't tried was sitting in it. So happened to be my character had the key, sat in it, and boom, mystery solved. Well, then once we get to this secret area, the key had these different letters on it, and we had to kind of figure out that depending on which of the multiple locations it got you to, which combination got you to which other location. And so it, again, a multi-level puzzle. So you can have it be a simple puzzle that there's some little intricate device for the locking mechanism, maybe, that you just, like Tetris, you slide things around till you get it in the right order, and then it unlocks the door. Or you could have it something like what I've explained in my experience in games, a, quote, multi-level puzzle, that there's more than one piece to it. And they are, in themselves, like riddles. It doesn't, and some people aren't good at riddles, but they're good at puzzles. And so the clever use of either one depends on your group in some respects. Some riddles are obvious to the person that develops the riddle, but to the person trying to figure out what you mean by a certain phrase or a certain key term, that can be a challenge. And let it stand. Let the players try to figure it out. Another good puzzle is having some mysterious prophecy. In the game I run on Sundays, there's a prophecy about some chosen one that the party has learned about, that only the chosen one can go through this door that's got a bunch of dead bodies of everybody else that has tried to go through this door piled up. And so they're trying to figure out, is one of them the chosen one? Are they looking for somebody? And it's yet to be determined. So that's all I'm going to say about it, because I can't give it away. Another type of puzzle, in the current dungeon I have, there are some rooms that are guarded by these statues that if you don't do something right, they attack you and try to stop you from going through these doors. And the party eventually found this object that let them go past, and the statues didn't even look at them. Rather, they stood at attention and let them go by. So you don't have to make it easy. You don't have to make it obvious. Just present it in such a way that it makes sense in your world or the situation. And if you've got a crazy gonzo world situation, it's okay to have a crazy gonzo explanation for how this all fits together. If it's a more structured and well-defined, I don't want to say, what's the right word? Some people might say boring. That's not what I mean. I mean a more level-headed. What's the opposite of gonzo? It's not boring. It's just a different style of play, that the way, whatever this answer to the puzzle is, has to fit with whatever it is the answer reveals. And the same way works with riddles. As long as it's done in a way that fits your world, fits your campaign, fits the situation in which it's found, and the solution matches, so that the players aren't saying, oh, that's not fair or whatever, just give them time. And unless I would limit greatly a time limit that they're going to die if they don't solve it. And if you have something like that, I believe, Matt Colville talked about that in one of his more recent videos. Telegraph that if they go in here, they're going to face death. Give them all the heads up in the world, so if they persist and go, that they're not surprised when they've got this time limit before they solve the riddle or puzzle or whatever it is that's going to save them. And it shouldn't be something that's impossible. And you need to remember that if your players are in the moment and you boost that adrenaline, you don't think as clearly when you're boosting adrenaline. And I understand that. I was way back when a volunteer firefighter and an EMT, and when your adrenaline gets going, you go with what you've trained to do. And if you're not trained to solve riddles and puzzles under stress, you're not going to be as efficient under stress trying to solve puzzles and riddles as you are sitting back. It's like watching Jeopardy. I can kill on Jeopardy on TV. You put me up on that stage and I'm probably not going to win. It's the same way when you put your players under stress. So keep all that in mind. Set up a fair, within the what makes sense within your world, whatever the game is. It doesn't have to be D&D. It can be science fiction, Western, whatever the scenario is, whatever the game world is, whatever the genre is, as long as it makes sense and fits whatever the specific situation is in that genre in your game world, then the player should be fine with it. The hard part is coming up with something to make your puzzles. So, and it doesn't have to be how to open doors or get past doors. It could be how do you stop the bad guy? You know, if you don't know how to stop the bad guy, you're going to spend a lot of time trying to figure it out, because we really need to stop the bad guy. That's a big puzzle. In the game I play on Wednesday nights, we're trying to figure out how to save the world. Talk about a puzzle. That's the whole, we finally realized that was the whole point of the game, that if we don't figure this out, well, we found a way out to get to another dimension if we can't figure it out, but it's not going to save everybody. We're going to say goodbye to all the rest of the world. So you don't necessarily have to have that level of consequences for failure as destruction of your world. And the bad guy doesn't have to be the most powerful evil bad guy that the world has ever seen. It could just be the low-level bad guy they're fighting. Or you're coming up against a kind of undead that has some unique twist that they've never experienced in any other game or so forth, and trying to figure out how to deal with it so that they can save the village and so forth. So a puzzle doesn't have to be something that you necessarily think of as a puzzle, because basically a riddle or puzzle is going to be anything to which the players don't know the answer. And in a sense, it's the whole game world is a puzzle, because they're trying to figure out, okay, where's the dungeon? That's a puzzle. When you get to the dungeon, where's the treasure? How do we avoid the traps? How do we avoid the monsters? We didn't avoid the monsters. How do we get out without having to go back through and fight them again? Or we didn't avoid the traps. How do we get our friend out? Or our friend's gone. How do we get out of here without getting sucked in the trap ourselves? So broaden the horizon of what you see as a puzzle or a riddle, and you'll be able to start seeing how to present things in a way that invite your players to step up and try to figure it out. And it shouldn't necessarily be forced. It should be a way that the players feel like it's a challenge that encourages them to stretch and do their best, to use their own mind power as well as role-playing and the rules of your particular system to try to get through this. Some call it a skill challenge. Well, skill challenge, you're rolling dice. It shouldn't just be rolling dice. It should involve actually figuring things out. And that's more the old school way of doing it, because we didn't have all these rules for roll this and roll that. You just said, oh, I'm going to go do this. And for certain things, there was a skill challenge, like a thief picking a lock or whatever. But for the most part, it was your own natural intelligence and skill and cunning to try to figure things out. So you want to keep all those different pieces in mind, and you can find all kinds of, a trap is a sort of a puzzle. Finding it, avoiding it, disarming it, escaping it if you're captured by a trap, if it's not a lethal trap. Just keep in mind that your players may think of a solution that you didn't think of, and you're like, oh, yeah, that could work too. It's okay to change how it works in your mind if they come up with a valid solution. with the statues guarding a door. My players came up with a fabulous way of how to deal with them so they didn't have to fight them. And it didn't go as well as they had thought, but it was more successful than having to fight a whole bunch of them at once. So you've got to let your players, quote, win, have success when they come up with a good idea that within the logic of your world, your game, your rules, makes sense. And that's half the fun of role-playing, is as the game master, you're presenting these challenges to people, these puzzles, these riddles, and they come up with a solution that you didn't think of. How cool is that? Because then you're like, oh yeah, you're learning the same time. And then you've got even more, so that if you have a new batch of players run through a scenario, you know that there's other solutions. You can present your puzzle, your riddle, whatever it is, in a different way because you see it differently after the first group's gone through it. And if it's something where different groups have different solutions, that can be really cool depending on what it is. I don't have a good example of that, but I have seen different players approach the same situation totally differently, and so you just never know what you're going to get with a different mix of players. So those are some general ideas, a few specific. Some of them I can't get too specific on because I don't want to give stuff away for my players. I have to give that some more thought, but I'd like to know what sort of puzzles and riddles have you experienced. And I'll be giving some more thought to that and trying to put something together on my blog later. So I really appreciate all the questions that I've been getting on my videos. Thanks for the like and the thumbs up. Share, tell your friends. Please subscribe if you haven't already. And if there's anything role-playing related that you'd like to know more about, I'll be glad to answer any questions I can. This is great. It's fun to do this, and I just appreciate everybody that's subscribed and everybody that's interacting with me and your questions and your comments. So keep the questions and comments coming, and game on.